Hello, ladies and should I try that again? Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Wild and Live. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We are going to be talking about wildlife filmmaking. Usually, I've got a guest that joins me, and we talk about different aspects of biology, cool animals, earth sciences. But today it's all about you guys. I'm pointing there, but I'm also pointing there because I got a whole bunch of people online on Instagram, doing an Instagram live right here. Boom! So if you have any questions, whether you're on Instagram or here on YouTube, definitely let me know. So yeah, like I said, usually these episodes are kind of geared towards kids and families and teachers, but it's still, if you are one of those three, yes, this is still for you. But I thought I'd also do something for people that are aspiring filmmakers. So this is a question that I get a lot. How do I get into wildlife filmmaking, or how do I get into working with animals? So I figured what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little touch briefly on who I am, what I do, and then I'm going to be answering your questions, and I'm going to be going through some things that I think might be helpful for you guys. We've got about 20 minutes. Hopefully this will be enjoyable for you guys, and it'll give you some value. So but remember, as I'm talking now, please get your questions into the question box, either on YouTube or on here on Instagram. So, who am I? I mean, I suppose many of you probably know who I am. For those of you that don't, my name is Patrick Aryee. I'm a wildlife TV presenter. I have been working in the wildlife filmmaking industry for about 11 years now, which makes me sound really old. I've got my Zimmer frame right next to me. So I was working in production, so that's as a crew member for about 5 years, and I've been presenting for about 6. How did I get into it? So I started out, if we kind of rewind, actually, I remember one of my biology teachers at sixth form, John Owen. Mr. Owen said, I remember he found out that I was going to Bristol, and his words were, "Oh, that'd be great because you'd make a fabulous presenter. You should look at the BBC NHU." And at the time, I had different ideas. I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to work in the lab. So I kind of dismissed it, but it's kind of funny that, some people can identify certain traits in you. So that was quite interesting. Anyways, I went to Bristol Uni, studied molecular and cellular biology. Always had a passion for knowing or finding out how things work. And so that kind of sets me apart really from a lot of people that are trying to get into wildlife filmmaking who have traditional degrees like biology and zoology. But that's what I was passionate about. So I stuck with that. After my degree, I studied a master's in science communication, and at the same time, I was trying to get into the TV industry. I was living in Bristol at the time. I didn't know anybody that worked in film and TV. I managed to get onto a scheme through a wildlife charity, which is called Creative England. I got down from 300 down to last 6, and was placed at the BBC. Spent 2 years working as an edit assistant, which is the kind of technical side of things. And then finally got into production, and that's where I got to work with some pretty big names in TV. So people that work on Frozen Planet, Blue Planet, the main man himself, Sir David Attenborough. I've worked with him twice now, which is pretty cool. And then eventually I got my big break and started working as a wildlife TV presenter, and haven't looked back since. So yeah, it's been, I mean, that's the truncated, shortened version. There's a lot more to it than that, but hopefully I can use some of that experience to help you guys. So what I'm going to do right now is just have a quick look through on Instagram, see if we've got any questions here. Let's have a look. Let's have a quick look. Hello from Turkey. Sweet. Yes. Let's see. Ben Harris has joined. What's up, Ben? Ben's asking, how do I get such a fresh fade? If you look carefully, you can see all that salt and pepper. There ain't no fade there, brother. I have not had a haircut for ages. So let's have a quick look. I haven't seen any pressing questions specifically about wildlife filmmaking. Bertie Gregory, what's up? Bertie's a wildlife filmmaker. Again, another young gun that's made it pretty big in the wildlife filmmaking industry. I'm sure he's probably got a lot of expertise that would be helpful for you too. So yeah, Bertie, if you've got any top tips, send them through, brother. I'm going to start with, hang on, I've got a little list here. So let's do a little rewind, select that. So a lot of people have asked about how they get into wildlife filmmaking, and I would say the first step is to create your own content. So before you even start thinking about getting in touch with producers and production companies, you got to start with yourself. Figure out what exactly it is that you are passionate about or you want to do. So I've had emails before saying I want to work with animals. I'm like, yo, sure, bro, sure, sis. Like, but working with animals is such a broad statement to make. Do you want to work in a zoo? Do you want to be a conservationist? Do you want to be working wildlife filmmaking TV? So yeah, the first thing is to kind of get an idea of where you want to work. And so obviously for the purposes of today, we're talking about wildlife filmmaking. I think you should always have an understanding for the things that you're passionate about. So let's take, sure, you want to be in wildlife filmmaking, but you might be really passionate about art, drawing, animation, cartoons. Do not discount your personal interests, because that's what's going to make you stand out compared to everybody else. Do not try and fit in. And I'll be honest, that's kind of what I was doing at the start. I was trying to fit in and trying to be what I saw as being successful. So one of the challenges I faced when I first started working in TV was that I didn't have a zoology or biology degree. My degree was in cancer biology. So that's looking at genetics, biochemistry, molecular and cellular biology, still within the field of biology. But each time I went for an application or for an interview for a researcher job, I was told, you don't have a straight biology or zoology degree, which is absolute nonsense. But so I was always trying to make myself fit into the zoology camp, which I'm not part of that. It's a related field, but do not discount your expertise, your interests. Be yourself. Platforms like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok is a new one. Those are the platforms that you should start with in terms of being creative, and that could be just making short videos in your garden. That could be going to your local wildlife patch. That could be anything, but it's all about making your own stuff. You could be an artist, draw. Podcasts are huge now, so that's a really great way of being able to show that you have an understanding of how to create a story, a narrative arc, your setup, your conflict, your resolution, and it also gets you used to doing all the things that you're going to be doing when you work in production. So that's writing, speaking, production, getting the technical side of things. So I would say start with your own content. Let's have a look to see if we've got any other questions here. I'm going to be going through Bertie Gregory. Cheers, brother. Okay, so this is a really good one. This is coming in from Nessie Nature Notebook. She's asking, what is the etiquette? Should I approach organizations for opportunities to talk and present? So again, like I said, first thing, Nessie, is to I'd say definitely create your own content, because then you're like I said, you're learning about that, how to create a story. You're making all the mistakes by yourself first. In terms of getting in touch with companies, there are, I'm going to rewind actually a little bit before I answer that question, Nessie. So in the TV industry, it kind of works a little bit like this in very simple terms. Someone comes up with a creative idea for a show. You then, as a independent production company, or if you're an individual, you go and speak to an independent production company that makes shows. You tell them about your idea. In the most ideal world, they go, wow, that's incredible, Laura. Love that idea. Let's take it to a broadcaster. So then you go to a broadcaster like the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, National Geographic, and you speak to the commissioner there and you say, look, we've got this idea that we want to film about primates, for example. They have a look at your proposal and they go, great, here's £1 million to make 3 or 4 episodes. That is how it would work in an ideal situation, but that's not generally the case. You tend to have to, the number of ideas you have to come up with before you then actually make your show is probably like 50 to 1, maybe even 100 to 1. So that's kind of how it works. In terms of who you should get in touch with, your best bet is to speak to people who are independent production companies. So the BBC, of course, is a broadcaster and a production company at the same time. So they make shows and they broadcast shows. So for me, the BBC was, of course, going to be one of my one of the companies that I wanted to get involved with quite early on. Outside of the BBC is not the be all and end all, and that's something that I realized quite late on. There are loads of different independent production companies. In Bristol, there's Icon, there's Offspring Films, there's Wildstar, what else? Silverback Films, Off the Fence. I could literally go on, but yeah, there are loads of different independent production companies, and those are the people that you want to speak to because they are the ones that make the shows. In terms of getting in touch with them, find out, most of the time their email addresses are online. I would say, Nessie, that this is quite tricky, isn't it? So I would always start by introducing yourself, say what your passions are, what you want to do. But you should do this in a really strategic way. So think about what that production company makes. So let's take Icon Films, for example. They're based in Bristol. They're well known for making the River Monsters series. So if you are into River Monsters or into that kind of observational documentary style of filmmaking, that more kind of run and gun, focusing on that presenter-led and kind of story and stories that interact with other people. Wait for that train to go by. Then Icon would be a great team for you to work with. When you're emailing them, make sure you want them to understand that you know what kind of content they create. So, get in touch with their production teams, production company, with their production management teams. Usually it's just like an info at or whatever their email address is. I would say it's really important to know your worth on this front. I always went with that. I'm really keen to work with in your company. I work well as an individual and as a team. I mean, and when I look back at those emails, I'm just like, noob. Try and make yourself stand out by coming up with some ideas. If you approach a company and say, I've got X idea, I think this would fit within your aligns with the type of content that your production company makes, that for a producer is more enticing and than, hey, I just want to work with you, if that makes sense. So I hope that's answered your question, Nessie. In terms of the more detailed etiquette, in terms of how many times to email them, I would start with your first email on day 1. If you don't hear anything within 2 weeks, email them again, and another 2 weeks, go for it again. I would. Of course, you don't want to email too much, because then sometimes you get a bad rep as like, oh, that's someone that just continues to email. But those companies also should be able to reply to you and say, hey, look, we're fully staffed at the moment. Get back to us in about 3 months. So I'd go day 1, email them again in 2 weeks, and then maybe follow up in a month or in the next 3 months. If you do get a reply, that's great. Sometimes they don't have opportunities. So I would use your diary, use your calendar, put a marker in for 3 months' time, and say email so and so again. And as long as you're polite about your approach and you're considerate, I think there's no reason for them to want to speak to you. Let's have another look. Let's scroll down. What's going on here? I hope that answered your question, Nessie. So I'm going down. Let's have a look. Carter. In terms of wildlife filmmaking, what opportunities are there behind the camera? Like, you don't necessarily want to be in front of the camera, but you want to be part of the crew. Okay, so yeah, when you're making a show, I tend to be in front of the camera as the host, but you've got the camera operator, so that's a camera woman or the cameraman. You've got the runner, which is your kind of entry-level position. So runners are the people that really, they're kind of like the backbone of the production industry. You come in at such a junior level, you're kind of green, fresh, And your experience can range from anything from getting people teas and coffees, lunches, all the way to flying out to different countries to pick up kit or to work with a sound guy, sound girl, and a camera operator. So the runner is the start of the ladder. As you move up, you get to junior researcher, assistant producer, producer, director. You can, if you want to work on the production side, you want to start out as a runner. And so that's where you'll be able to see a lot of the different aspects of TV. So far, I'm only talking about production. You obviously have pre-production and post-production. So pre-production would be working in a development team. So you come in as maybe a development researcher or development runner. And then on the post-production side, you can work as an edit assistant and as an editor. There are lots of different technical roles there. So yeah, those are the different opportunities that, or different types of role there are. I'm going to whiz through these as quickly as I can. So we've got another question from Wildlife Louis, from Louis Fletcher. So Louis, I'm going to read the questions that you sent to me earlier. So Louis is saying he's meant to be traveling to Eastern South Africa to make a wildlife documentary for his final project, but now that's all up in the air. What would you recommend I do in my situation? Question number one. I need more of a show reel. I need more of a show reel. What's the best way to gain experience and have enough material to show to get into the industry? And finally, what is it that employers like the BBC are looking for? So I'll try and answer all those questions for you, Louis. So I assume you're doing a master's. I think you're doing a master's in Cardiff. I wouldn't worry about whether your project goes ahead or not. That's in relation to getting a job. That, it's going to be a bonus if you manage to make a wildlife film. If you don't, literally don't worry. It's not the be all and end all at all. If anything, you're way ahead of the curve. I would definitely recommend, for anybody else that's watching, I would recommend the wildlife filmmaking masters at UWE. There are other wildlife filmmaking courses, but the reason why I'd recommend the one at UWE is because it's got a very strong affiliation with the Bristol filmmaking community and with the BBC in particular. And so you're going to be exposed to different camera operators, directors, people that are in the industry and the people that you're going to want to work with. And that's another part of what it takes to work in the industry. It's about forming a community and being part of the community. So I wouldn't worry about if you can't make that film. There are so many other things that you can do. There are a couple of sites out there that have free archives. So you could, if you really wanted to, go through some archive content and footage and make an archive show. You don't have to film the content. Sometimes we get caught up in, I have to go out there, I have to film it, I have to edit it. That's not so. Maybe you get in touch with a wildlife conservation company or organization or charity, whether it's in East Africa or South Africa. There are loads. So, and maybe they have content of their own and they just need someone to put it together to create a little story or create a short film for them. So that's another way of being able to be creative without going out and filming stuff yourself. I need more of a show reel. You don't need a show reel. Not at all, especially if you're not, if you want to be a presenter, you do. If you don't need a show reel. You just need to show that you understand the process. It does help, but you don't need one. I would say one of the best ways of showing a producer that you understand that you've got talent is by finding stories and saying, hey, these are some great stories that caught my attention. How do you think you'd go about creating a sequence for that, or thinking up a sequence for how you would shoot that particular story? Let's have a look. Finally, what is it that employers are looking for? This is really tricky, and this is something that I've had to it changes all the time, and sometimes it changes depending on what country you're in. Like if you're in the States, they're way more bolshy about how they come across. Whereas in the UK, we're a bit more reserved. If you're if you're too bolshy, you come across arrogant here in the UK. So, and it's different depending on whether you're at the BBC, whether you're working for someone, another independent company. I would just say, one, be yourself. Be yourself, because everybody else is taken. what I would look for is someone that has a little bit of talent, that is nice to work with. Yo, don't come in thinking that you're a hot shot and not really be a part of the team. It's all about being part of the team and being pleasant to work with. That's that's what I look for. And someone that understands the nuances of it. Sorry if you can hear the noise coming from outside. That's I live right next to a busy train track. Someone who understands stories, like, and can find really interesting stories. And I did find that really hard, because people say, yeah, it's all about storytelling, man. I'm like, what does that mean? So Ben Harris, shout out to Ben Harris, wildlife cameraman. We've worked together a couple of times. It's been great seeing his journey. He said something to me last year, which I've just picked up on again recently, which is how to structure your story. So it's all about having your intro or your setup, your conflict, your resolution, and just by kind of having that in mind, that helps me to think about, okay, what is the story? So say what you're going to do, allow it to play out, and then conclusion. So yeah, for me, I'd be looking out for someone that has an eye for a story, and use different resources. So you've got the Wildlife Trust, you've got the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, the Rivers Trust, the Marine Conservation Society, the Natural History Museum. All of those different organizations have a news section. So go to their news section and start reading, find out about what those people are doing, because that can help you find different leads, different stories, different characters. It's all about finding some characters. So I'd say that's what the employers are looking for. I hope that helped you out there, Louis. So let's have a look. What did you do as part of your researcher job in TV? That's from Lauren. And what got you into wildlife work? So what was I doing as part of my researcher job? Researcher roles change and are different. For me, I had to find a way to. So as I mentioned before, my first role was as an edit assistant, and again, more trains. My first role was as an edit assistant. Let me close that window. And so that's it. That's the digital equivalent of being in a dark room, in a photography dark room. And so I had very little interaction with people, but I was just learning, watching what people were doing. For me, I noticed that there was a production that it was called Madagascar. That was the first show that I worked on with Sir David Attenborough, and it looked like they needed somebody to look after their technical equipment, but then also they needed a junior researcher. So for me, my role in that particular case was a combination of two skills. So even though I'd started at the BBC as an edit assistant, and at first I was like, why am I in this technical role? I want to be an editorial. So that's coming up with the different ideas for the different sequences and stories that you film. It worked out that the way I was able to get that role is because I was able to say, hey, I can do two things at once. Typically, as a researcher, you're going to be working very closely to your producer, your director, or your assistant producer. You're going to be working in a team. They want you to be able to come up with ideas. So you might sit down and brainstorm and start thinking about different ways to structure a story, or you're just coming up with different concepts for program ideas. As someone that so those are the different elements of being a researcher. When you're actually in the job, the best thing about being a researcher is that you're at that perfect intermediary between, you've leveled up from being a runner, you've got a lot more experience, but not as much experience or not as much responsibility as, say, a director who has to look after the entire production. So it's great because you get to travel. That's one of the big things that people love about wildlife TV. You get to travel to different countries and see different people, not just the animals. It's all about the different communities and people that you meet on the way. Your job involves everything from making sure that everybody knows what's going on in terms of the schedule. So when people are traveling to the airport, where if you got transfers, knowing that you've got a carnet to fill out. So that's a piece of paper that says what high value items you're bringing into a country. They do that for tax reasons. Once you get to your location, where are your contributors, which organizations are you working with, having the scripts ready, having fact sheets ready, being ready to support your camera operator and your director. So in terms of what you do, there's so much, and that's why I think that's probably one of the best roles when you're working in TV. I think the runner is one of the most important, because you can, the runners are indispensable, and then I think you start having the most fun once you get to the researcher stage. So yeah, that's kind of what you have to do as part of a when you want to part of a film crew. What got you into wildlife work? So I got into wildlife TV because I always I loved science, and so that's why my degree was in molecular biology. I What got me into wildlife TV? I think I really like watching TV. So here's a really funny. I found this hilarious. Well, not hilarious, but I found it quite interesting that when I first started working in wildlife TV, there were lots of people, directors and producers, who don't watch TV. To me, that doesn't make sense. If you're creating and producing content, you should be really consuming that as well. For me, I'm a really fan. I'm a really big fan of reality TV, and people have mixed opinions on that. I would say that, especially if you're working in wildlife TV, do not discount things like reality TV or daytime TV, because those shows are really good at capturing an audience's attention. So let's take Love Island, for example, or Love is Blind, or there's a new one called Too Hot to Handle. All of those shows, like when you look at the structure of the show, the producers are so clever. They know how to tell that story, that narrative arc. They've got that setup. They allow that conflict to play out, and then you get that resolution of someone, transforming their character or learning something new. So, those, I would say that it's really important to watch TV, watch content, not just in the genre that you want to be a part of. Make sure that you have a broader understanding of the industry as a whole, because you might then find out that there's ways to cross hybridize different genres, and that's when you might come up with something interesting, which is when you might get your commission. So I hope that answered your question. I don't know if I did actually answer your question. What do you recommend is the best way to network in industry, if not through a master's? Instagram. Use social platforms to your advantage. Once we're done with this, I'll see if I can find a couple of Instagram accounts that I think are really great. There's Roxy the Zoologist, there's Lara Wildlife, there's Lizzie Daly, Bertie Gregory was on here earlier. There is Stephanie Arney. There's so many different people who are creating content that I think would be worth you having a look at. So make your own stuff and be part of a community. Be part of the community. One website that would be helpful for you guys is one called Natural History Network. The link is already at the bottom in the description, so take a look at that when you once we're all done. Let's have a look. Gosh, let's see. We've got loads and loads of comments. Okay, cool. People joining. Let's see. Is there a lot of rejection during your journey of becoming a filmmaker? As in, personally, that's how hard is it to become a wildlife filmmaker? Is there a lot of rejection involved from, and I can't pronounce your name, from Kieran? Is there a lot of rejection involved? Hell yeah, lots and lots of rejection. I'm going to come to your question in a second, Adrian. There is a lot of rejection, and I suppose that's one of the things that you have to be prepared for. Also, you're gonna make sure, if you're at the beginning of your journey, make sure you save as much money as possible. People don't talk about saving money these days, so save as much as you can, because when you first start, the wages aren't that great. I think I was on, like, my first job, I was on 13k, which when you're living in London, it doesn't really get you that far. So yeah, you're looking at, as a researcher, maybe, I don't know, 24, if you're like, that's like once for me, that's kind of where after like a couple of years of working in the industry, I was on 24,000 pounds a year. So that, whereas a lot of my friends who are working in banking and finance, that, they were on like 40, but from the get. So just be prepared that you're gonna, it's not, in terms, if you're looking to make money, wildlife film isn't the place to be, at least in the initial stages. It is a business, and there are ways for you to make like real serious bucks, but that's gonna come a bit later on in your career. So yeah, rejection happens a lot. I've been rejected loads. Like, number of times I applied for a role on a production. It was usually as a researcher. You just didn't even get an interview. So, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew that nobody was going to stop me. So I just kept on persisting. And persisting doesn't mean nagging people. So, for example, one of the things that I did to help me become a presenter was that on the side, I was there's a TV show called See Here. It's for the blind and hard of hearing, and so one of the producers caught wind that I wanted to be a presenter, and they're like, look, we can't pay you, but we'd love for you to be one of the voices on the show. And to me, that was great, because it was effectively, I was getting free training on a show that's going out on TV. For them, it was great because they could use my voice and they didn't have to pay someone, and I was in the building. So again, that's where opportunities come up when you're just working and part of the community. So, but yeah, rejection happens all the time. You just have to just be careful to not. I'm not saying that if someone gives you some positive feedback, or useful feedback, not to bear that in mind. But so you know, figure out whether that rejection is something that you can change. You know, maybe it's that you don't have that. I'm not too sure how to kind of phrase this, but some of the things you can change, and others you can't. It's just because so many people want to get involved in TV, so you're gonna, and there's one position for every 300 people that apply. So you know that's reducing your odds. But some of the things you can prepare for. Sometimes when you're rejected, here's a really interesting thought. Right, you get rejected, and someone says no. One of my favorite things is turning a no into a yes. And that doesn't mean, bugging people, but you can, if someone says no, that's like, you reply to them, say, thank you so much for the opportunity. It would be great to get some feedback on how to improve my chances next time. Sometimes they'll reply, sometimes they won't. But though, once you've made made a connection with someone, you never know what opportunities will come up later. So, it's always worth touching base with those people that give you some opportunities, or even if you don't make it through 3 months down the line. Again, use your calendar and get back to them. Let's have a look. I hope that made some sense. Do you think someone without a science-related degree can get into wildlife work? 100% yes. Okay, so this is a really good example. One of my producers, her name's Susie Painter. She was working on the second production that I was working on, which is was called Attenborough's 60 Years in the Wild. We were looking at Attenborough's 60-year-long career. We were looking at all the different aspects from when he first started in the 50s. I think it was in the 50s, 54. And she got asked to make a program about the history of national parks, and one of her first, I think, natural history director roles was on something called Natural Histories. I think Unnatural Histories or Natural Histories. Essentially, they're looking at the history of these national parks, and she was producing the episode on the Serengeti. And off the back of that, she then started working in wildlife TV. And someone asked her, oh, where did you study your zoology degree? And she said, I didn't study zoology, I studied history. And that's a good example of where, traditionally at places like the BBC, it can be a bit, sometimes there's this air of elitism, and it's like, if you don't have a zoology degree or a biology degree, you're not really going to get a job here. Whereas with Susie, example, that she's a history major, she's able to she has the understanding of how to conduct research, find a story, and lay this out in a format that would work as a program. So no, you don't have to have a biology or wildlife related degree, but it does help. Let's have a little quick look. Jason Savage, what's up? Daniel O'Neill, let's have a look. I'm going to scroll down. Okay, so we've got 2 more questions from... Do you create stories based on information about species then go and get the footage to tell that story? or do you aim to get the footage of a wide range of different subjects and then go from there? So it's a mixture. So each of your projects will change. So sometimes you're going out to tell a very specific story. We want to tell the story of lions and how they interact as a pride, and how this particular pride of lions at night has a very special hunting strategy, which is that they hunt elephants. Excuse me. So some lions have developed the strategy of hunting an elephant, which is a huge animal, and they tend to do that at night because they are nocturnal hunters. And so in that case, you're going to be wanting to film a very specific type of behavior. Sometimes you might find that you're going out to tell maybe a looser story. So you want to go and film meerkats, and you want to showcase and highlight the family structure because they got very complex family structures. So that's your loose guideline as to what you're going to be filming. But whilst you're out there, you might end up seeing different types of behavior. So you might see that adults are feeding or presenting young meerkats with scorpions with their tails ripped off, or dead scorpions, and that's all part of how the older scorpions or the adult scorpions teach the babies or the juveniles. So that's one part of the story. Then you might find that that this family of meerkats it comes into contact with a predator like a snake. So now you've got this another dynamic element to life as a meerkat. Maybe there's infighting. In the morning when they wake up, they're amazing. So these meerkats come up out of their dens. They sit out in the sun and they just soak up. They're like the ultimate sunbathers. They love sun worshipping, and so they sit out in the sun to warm up their bodies. And it's just amazing watching. So now you've got maybe intimate behavior. Sometimes you see these little meerkats like they're trying to sunbathe and sun soak, and they just fall asleep and they're like, whoop, and they fall over. So that then allows you to capture content which people can relate to, and that then builds up your story. So sometimes it's very specific, sometimes it's a lot looser. It varies. It varies from project to project. So I hope that helps, Mr. Carter. Let's have a look. We've got a couple more questions, which is good. Keep them coming. I'm going to have a look on here, actually. Let's have a quick look. Mateo Jackson, not quite sure what I want to do with animals. I want to be a vet, but let's have a look. What's going on here? Looks like YouTube is being a bit weird, but hopefully it's still recording. I'm not sure. I think it is. So let's keep on going. So you want to be Mateo? You want to be a vet? I managed to get a volunteer job at a zoo and loved it until heaven 7. So Mateo, how old are you, Mateo? That I think that's probably the a good question to start with. How old are you? Let me know, and hopefully I can answer your question. So yeah, sorry, I'm just having a look at the YouTube stream. If you can still see me, that's great. I just want to make sure that this is still going. I think the internet is playing up a little bit. Okay, I think we're going to go for another 5-10 minutes, and then we'll call it a day there. This is just like a little intro to wildlife filmmaking. I thought I'd hop on, do a little Q&A with you guys, and try and answer some of your questions. So, yeah, Mateo, let me know, how old are you? Because I think, yeah, it's he's telling you, yeah, I was too young. Just keep on being creative. So whether that's music, so one example for me, I love electronic music, house, Afro beats, tribal house, and something that I'd like to play around with is taking that kind of music and creating content with wildlife stock footage. So you know, that's just do the things that you love and find ways of being clever with creating your content. I hope that kind of answers your question. Let's have a look from Lauren. What's up, Lauren? Been a little while. She says, am I talking about dating or work. I'm talking about work, Lauren. I'm talking about work. We're talking about wildlife filmmaking. It's a little intro, a little Q&A session to try and help other people that are interested in getting into the industry. Let's have a quick look. I'm going to scroll through. Would there ever be a scenario where more established wildlife communicator would collaborate with an upcoming amateur during quiet periods? Are you talking about collaborating with me? Yes, that does happen. You just need the right situation or the right project for that. What else? Let's have a look. Shamik Sanyal Wildlife. Yes, I have a geography major and I'm working with scientists here in India. What's up? All the way from India. Thank you for tuning in. Self-education is more important than anything. Yes, you're correct. Let's see if there's any other question. Does going to wildlife filmmaking school increase your chances of getting a job? I would say that it's not necessary, but like I mentioned earlier in this stream, I would recommend the UE Wildlife Filmmaking course specifically because it's based in Bristol, and that's where the Natural History Unit is based. That's where the BBC make all of their wildlife programs, and it was set up back in the 50s, I think, back in the 50s, and that because it's a wildlife filmmaking hub, you've got loads and loads of independent production companies that work there as well. So by doing the masters there, you're already part of the community, and they all know about the masters program, and so it's a great place for them to source talent as well. So that does help, but it's not the be all and end all. You could be working with a wildlife trust or with a wildlife charity. Let's have a little look. Are you happy to be approached on Instagram for chats or advice as filmmakers? I would say most people are going to give you as much advice as they can. If you do ask people for advice, I would say try and make it as specific as possible. So the question I tend to get all the time is, how do I get into the industry, which makes sense. But I would say when you approach people, try and have specific questions, make them as specific as you can, because then they can help you a bit more when they do have time. So yeah, I guess I'm trying to find, I want to be as helpful as I can to that question from wildlife.zt. The way to get people's attention is if you have something that can make their lives easier. So again, if you approach someone, it's always great to say, I don't know, I haven't got an example that I can necessarily give you right now, but find a way of engaging them before you've asked their question. There's a guy called Gary Vee. I listen to his podcast all the time. If you don't listen to Gary Vee, check it out. He has this concept of jab, 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 right hook. And what does that mean? What does jab, 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 right hook mean? It means that you give, ask. So people don't mind you asking for help, but if you continually ask for help, then it seems like you're just taking. So give as much as you can. So for example, right now I'm sharing my experiences with you, hopefully giving you guys some value. And so later down the line, maybe I might have a product or something that I want to do that requires some of your help. But it's better to give more than you receive, because that's the way that people are going to are more likely to engage with you. I hope that makes sense. Let's have a look. Adrian repost. Would you recommend a camera op transitioning into wildlife content to find people with projects, or finding a story and getting the project started themselves? Okay, so Adrian, this is doing it yourself is, I would always recommend doing that, but of course it's not paid, and yeah, it can be tricky because maybe you don't have the right kit or equipment. Definitely try and do it yourself. Be part of a community, and that's the way that that's going to help you create your own content. In terms of doing it yourself, sorry, that's a very specific but also a broad question. If you're still listening to this, Adrian, if you could be a bit more specific, that'd be great. Transitioning into wildlife content, I would definitely say find people that you can work with. it makes life so much easier because you can bounce ideas off each other. You can keep each other motivated. You both know the strains and stresses of working in an industry as a freelancer. So find a community, be part of that community, and then you start making content in your spare time. On a Saturday, maybe you spend the first half of the day, you go out like early and go down to your local wildlife patch or local wildlife park, or you start, maybe you're just doing interviews or podcasts, a great time to do that. Or Sunday evening, carve out a bit of time in your schedule to create your own content. A couple of bits of like more technical, well, not technical, gonna wrap up in a bit. If you are thinking about becoming a freelancer, or as soon as you start to get into that world, make sure you got all the things in place. So whether that's setting up a company, which you can do for, it's about £100, you just go to company's house and you tell them what your company name is. Get yourself an accountant, or at least be aware of the accountants that are near you, and how much it would cost, so that once you start earning money, that you've got all the kind of setup ready to go. Yeah, so that's just for later down the line. Let's have a look. So Carter's asking if I can elaborate on the wildlife filmmaking course at UWE. So UWE is UWE, and that stands for the University of the West of England. Sorry for those, I know, Carter, that you're out of the country. You're not in the UK. So I have a degree in zoology, so wondering how many years it would be to study a wildlife filmmaking course. It's a 1-year course. It's at the University of the West of England. Take a look at it. It's not, they don't have as many places as maybe they would like, because it's it's a highly prescribed course. But from loads of people that I've spoken to, have been on the, for me, I really would have liked, I studied science communication, and I would have loved to do the wildlife filmmaking course, but it just didn't exist. I think the first year was in 2013, and I'd finished my master's by then. So yeah, if you're interested, go to the WUE, University of the West of England, website and check it out. Still here, thanks for answering, says Adrian. Starting your own project, and doing more than just being a camera operator. Yeah, well, if you've got the skill of being able to either be a camera operator or a sound operator, maybe you're good at giving directions because you've got you've got a very clear vision in your mind. Team up with other people, and then you can start creating a whole bunch of different things, whether that's just from being behind the camera or being in front of the camera, or being a camera operator, or being part of more the creative editorial, I should say. Cool. I think that's what I'm gonna leave it at that for now. Okay, so Sharkman Dan, that's another guy you should check out. Definitely head over to his Instagram page. He's doing lots and lots of stuff with underwater filmmaking, underwater film. His footage is great. Another example of someone who's just going out there and doing it. Of course, when you look at some of the shots that he's got, and he'd be the first to say this, a lot of the kit and equipment costs a lot of money. But you can start really simply with like a GoPro, for example. That's your kind of entry level. Of course, they're still quite expensive depending on how much money you've got to spare. Probably about 300 quid, but that's a great place to at least start your process. So Carter, thanks for your help. Awesome. But yeah, shout out to Sharkman Dan. Thanks, brother. Devlin, what up, Devlin? Yo, says Devlin. What do you think is important to include on your CV when asking for work experience? Okay, so first thing about your CV, keep it to 1 page if you can. And if you do print it out, if it does have to be 2 pages, make sure it's on the same piece of paper. Of course, most of the time you're sending it, so they're going to print it out, which is why I say keep it on one sheet of paper. If you have the luxury of going in and giving them a hard copy, or you're sending out a letter, then make sure it's on one single piece of paper, just for the fact that it's easier for someone to pick up 1 piece of paper than 2. All of these things sound super trivial, but you want to make sure, you want to make your own luck. You want to make sure that you're removing any of the obstacles. Advice, I would say that volunteering. So for example, there's something called Wild Screen. It's a it's kind of like the green Oscars. It's described as the Oscars for wildlife films. That happens every 2 years. It's meant to be happening this year, but it might be off. Uh, Volunteering at something like that means that you're going to be able to, one, have experience, be exposed to the community, and it's something to then put on your CV. Asking the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust to go and volunteer, going to any one of these different organizations is going to help you. So I would say start with charitable organizations or wildlife organizations, be a part of their team, maybe come up with stories for them, write articles, get in touch and ask them, I'd love to write some stories for you for free. And they'll probably say yes. And that means that you then have some work that is published on a reputable website. So it's about being clever with how you get your initial experience, because the trouble that you probably have is you need experience to get experience. So how do I get in without experience? So be clever about the ways that the way that you structure your CV and the experience that you put down on there. Find ways of getting opportunities that have fewer limitations, and then that shows that you're part of the community. You're dedicated to this area of to this sector, and then hopefully you're more likely to get some work. So right, we've been doing this for about 50 minutes now, so I think I'm gonna wrap up. The last thing I want to touch on, two things really. One, TV in general is still a business. So, and that's something that I really didn't think about until much later, probably the last year or so. TV is a business. There's money to be made, and that money and that business runs on ideas, being creative. So keep your minds active. Like I said, do not discount or knock things like a Love Island, a Love is Blind, cooking shows, music, motorsport, whatever it is that you're interested in. You're going to learn a lot in terms of how to tell a story, and you might find some interesting new twists that you can then to create a new type of show. For example, going to kind of end on this point, TV is a business and it's fueled by creatives. So know your worth. I always end on this. Know your worth. Even if you're going to be you're going in as a runner, entry level, and you're super green, you're just like, I'll do anything really. Still know your worth, because there is a reason why that director needs a runner, because they don't have time to get lunches for everybody. Let's start at the most basic: lunches, teas, and coffees, right? My parents were so annoyed. I've come out with 2 degrees and I'm serving people lunches. But what I know is that I now have an opportunity to speak to the people that are making the content that I like. But I know I have worth. I know I've got, as a younger mind, typically you tend to, or even as someone who's more seasoned, if you're not part of the TV industry, your mind you haven't been indoctrinated with a TV mindset. So your mind is still free, and that's what they need. They need someone who can think outside of the box. So know your worth. And just to finish on this, be more sponge. What does that mean? Be a sponge. Soak up all the knowledge that you can. From working with different crews, I see how different camera operators work, how different sound operators work, how different directors work, how they communicate with different contributors. Always learn from other people, and once you see something that you like or see something that works, boom, make that part of you. That is now your repertoire. That's now your skill set. Watching and learning and becoming a sponge is how you're going to become a better filmmaker. And just to end on this point, one last point to end on, which is sound. We've been talking about filming. Sound is the most important thing, and hopefully you're getting nice sound. I can't test the sound right now, but I give this example of the Blair Witch Project. Terrible shaky camera, but the use of sound tells a story. How many times have we seen people kind of observational documentaries, running and gunning, and someone says, no, put the camera down. They put the camera down, but the sound is still running. You're still picking up the story. If your sound is crackly or echoey, I really hope it's not crackly or echoey right now, it's going to be annoying to listen to. So I'd say that sound is the best thing to start on. So if you're going to buy a piece of kit, 200 quid, you can buy a wireless microphone. It gives you a little pack, which is a receiver, and then another pack, which is a transmitter and has a little lapel mic. So I would start with that, because with those wireless microphones, you can then mic up your subject, you can mic up yourself, and then that sound is going to be protected from wind, from external sound sources of sound as well. So I would recommend getting yourself a wireless microphone set. So that's like two, that comes with like a pack to go on the camera and a pack to go on yourself, with a little wire to your to here. So yeah, I think that's about it. I hope that this has been helpful in some way. Great advice. Awesome. I hope I've managed to answer all of your questions. Thank you so much. It's been great. Our next episode, we're going to get back to our normal scheduling, which will resume on Monday at 11 a.m. We're going to be talking to Benito Wainwright, aka Benito Explains. He is an evolutionary biologist, a podcaster and YouTuber, and he's going to be talking about butterflies, and in particular butterfly brains. He scans butterfly brains for a living. So that's going to be interesting to hear. I hope that you enjoyed this particular session. Please leave a comment below. Let me know what you think, if you've got any more questions. And of course, last but not least, make sure you smash that subscribe button. You see that button right there? Click it. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. Until next week, I will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in. Take care. Right, how do I close this thing? How do I stop this? End stream. There we go. Okay, guys. Thanks.